So you're about to hear the story of the river buck. It's a pretty cool story. You're also going to notice that I don't edit. Some of the videos we edit a little stuff, maybe add some overlays on it or little music or whatever. But I'm a big fan of being authentic, and the guys I follow on YouTube and whatever, the more authentic, just being themselves, doing what they do. I mean, to me, that's a lot more interesting than, like, one of the videos, my daughter, she's very techie, but she edited a few things. I mean, she'd take just a few seconds of, like, dead noise or, pauses in between sentences out and whatever. And I said, don't do that anymore, because it looks like a glitch in the Matrix or whatever, because you know how it is, you cut it and all of a sudden your head's over here when you come back and your head's over here and the audio may be different. I said, that's stupid. Stop doing that. Unless you really screw up, then obviously you want to cut that out. That or just leave it and deal with it. So, that being said, if you don't like stuff that's raw, you're probably not going to want to follow us. So, if you do, you do. Appreciate it if you decide that that's what is interesting to you. So, here comes the story. So, I got another story to tell you. I'm really looking forward to this year. It'd be the first year we're actually going to videotape our adventures. I'm looking forward to that, just so these memories are actually in video form instead of just me telling you about it. Our main reason for starting this YouTube channel was to document all this stuff, so years from now we can look back at it, which is cool as hell to me. But more importantly is our great grandkids and great grandkids and so on can look back at this and long after we're gone and see what more or less know us without ever having met us, which is pretty neat to me. I wish I would know my grandfather who passed away 6 months before I was born and so on. It would be so cool to look back and see, because he was supposedly just like a hardcore hunter, fisherman, and obviously that's where I get it from, because I am literally obsessed with deer hunting. To the point of, and as older I get, the more obsessed with it I get, which a lot of people, it's the other way around, but that's just me. So anyway, we used to hunt at a camp in the UP that was 9 miles back in the woods, middle of nowhere. Tons of deer. It was in the 90s. That was pretty much pre-wolf. There was about 6 of us every year that hunted. And every year we'd all shoot a buck, or at least have opportunities to shoot buck or bucks. We'd always get to double tag, combo tag, just so you could shoot one and then just keep hunting, And opening morning, we scattered to our spots, and we're like 3 miles apart to the furthest guy, from east to west, north to south. No radios, no cell phone. You went out hunting, you didn't know what went on all day until you got back at camp at night and we're telling stories. And that's one of the best parts about deer camp, camaraderie. But anyway, sitting there opening morning, and when you heard a shot, even remotely close to the area you knew your guys were at, it was always them, because there was just nobody there. So opening morning, I heard a boom way off in the distance. I'm like, well, one of the guys got one. A little while later, boom, another one. And this went on till early afternoon, multiple shots. So I'm thinking, Jesus, I'm the only one left sitting out here in the stand. They all have bucks. They're back at the camp. I'm freezing. They're sitting there by a nice warm fire, eating steaks or whatever, and drinking a cold drink, and just, I'm missing all the stories, so you're just getting all wound up about that, So just before dark, a smaller buck came in, and I shot it. I'm like, I just got to get a buck down, because everybody else has got one. One of those deals, you're young, and stupid. So you gotta get one. So by the time I got back to the camp, it was almost 6 o'clock Central Time. And I pulled up to the camp, and the first thing you always do is look on the meat pole. And there was only 2 bucks hanging there. I'm thinking, man, all that shooting for that? Well, all the guys piled out of the camp. And what had happened, Fuzzer, he shot a 5-pointer right away in the morning. And then he just sat there waiting for a bigger one. About 10:30, a big 8-pointer come walking through, and he shot it, and it took off. Well, he ended up getting on the blood trail. And then he ended up kept jumping this thing in a huge swamp and shooting at it. And see, this was all that extra shooting that I was thinking every one of the guys had filled up. So about shortly after lunch, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, I guess, something like that, the deer ended up going closer to the camp, so he got off the track. Went back to the camp and got one of the other guys that had shot a buck who was sitting around, and he got on the track till dark. He shot at it one time as he jumped it, and he actually hit it. And all it did was, when it was running away, the bullet went right up the back strap. Never hit nothing vital. Tore up Fuzzer's back strap. So Fuzzy and I got back on it. It was probably about 7:30 that night by the time we walked a couple miles to get back into where Mark left off on it. Thankfully, we had snow, because otherwise it would have been almost impossible to follow it that far, because by that point it wasn't really bleeding at all anymore, but we were just following the tracks. But we knew it was wounded, so you don't give up. I mean, that never even enters your mind. So we get closer to the river, and by this point it was almost midnight, and this has been a long, drawn out process of jumping this deer in the dark and whatever, and just kept following, trying to run it down. And we never bring guns with us at night. I mean, now, since you got the concealed carry, you can at least carry a pistol with you, but I still believe that is illegal to shoot, finish off a deer with that. But regardless, we just never did that, and still wouldn't. We got a couple ways that we dispatch a wounded animal, which I will tell you about shortly. But anyway, we get down to the edge of the river, and we hear this thumping noise, boom, 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 boom. And I said, Fuzzy, what is that? He said, man, I don't know what that is. It's weird, middle of nowhere, and also you just really, like a drumming noise, just boom, 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 like this, really fast. So we get down the edge of that river, and it opened up pretty nice. Along the river was grassy, covered with snow, obviously, but it was still grassy and nice level ground. And shine her light across the river, and here's this buck standing in the river on its hind legs, trying to get up the bank, and that's his hoofs beating on the shoreline, frozen ground. Couldn't make it up because it was so steep, and I'm sure the deer was, up at this point, the deer had to have been just, dog tired. So Fuzzy, he was all jacked up, and he was going to walk in the river and go over there and stab the deer. And he started going in like a 1 boot or 2 boot, whatever. And I grabbed his jacket and pulled him back and said, hey, I said, look how deep that water is. That big buck standing in the water, and that water is up to the middle of its body or to the lower chest. I said, he's standing straight up. I'm like, you're going to drown because you're short as hell to begin with. Of course, after he hurled a couple obscenities at me for calling him short, we had to start chasing the deer because it dropped down back into the river and started swimming down the river. And man, those things can move in the water. It's amazing how fast they can swim. So we were trotting alongside the river. It got down a ways to this big bend in the river, and there was a little backwaters. So that deer swam into that backwaters and went up right against the bank and the tag alders and just kind of tucked right in. And our flashlight batteries were so dim by this point that they were pretty much useless. And we're like, man, I don't know what we're going to do now, because we're a long ways from the camp, and we have no way to get a hold of anybody. But before we had left, one of our buddies that was hunting with us, he's a really hardcore amateur radio guy. We had given us a handheld, this little bitty handheld, and said, hey, take this with you. I mean, if you get too far away, I'm not going to hear you back at the camp, but just if we're out and about, we'll maybe get to hear you and see what's going on. So I pulled that radio out and I said, hey, Dan, you got your ears on? And he almost immediately, yeah, I do. And I'm like, oh man, that was lucky. I said, where are you? Are you guys back at the camp that you can hear me? He said, no, him and my dad had gotten a truck and we're driving down every little stub road or logging trail that they could get down, just waiting to either find us or get us on the radio. And I said, well, tell Mark and Jason to grab batteries and an axe, because we got to kill this deer, and we use an axe, whop it in the head, which we've done a few times, and come get us or find us. He says, well, how am I supposed to do that? And I said, well, just tell them to go down the river, walk all the way down the river until you find us. Eventually, they're going to run right into us. We're standing on the bank. Can't miss us. So it was a good hour and a half later, and we're freaking cold. Fuzzy, at the time, smoked cigarettes. I remember him lighting a cigarette up, and he's pulling up to his mouth to take a drag of it, and his coat is just cracking and crunching because all the ice and everything was freezing up. So, like hour and a half later, we see flashlights coming up the bank of the river, and it's like, yeah, those guys are here. So Mark had went around, because this is the other way we have dispatched wounded deer in the night, was we take a nice long bladed knife and tie it to a really nice stout stick and get up close to it and jab it in the chest, and you get a nice long, you're going to pop lungs or a heart, heart poke, whatever, and it's going to die. Finish it off. So he went and tried that, but the stick wasn't stout enough, so he poked into the deer, and all that did is the stick just bowed, and it scared the deer into this little backwaters, which is probably 50 yards across, and it was 3/4 of the way iced up. The deer got right in the middle and laid its head on the ice and just laid there. It's like, well, man, now what are we going to do? So Mark says, hey, I'll throw a stick at the deer and maybe scare it, and it'll start, coming out. So he did that, and it started coming out, and it was going towards the river. So there's a little point of land that's maybe 8-10 feet wide between this backwaters and the river, and it came to a little point, where the backwaters came in. And Fuzzy and I we went around and stood on that because that's where the way the deer was coming. I had the axe, and he threw another stick at it, and it started, blowing up through the ice and water and stuff, and kept coming our way. I said, so hold on, we got to get ready, because the next time you do that, it's going to be close enough where it's going to be coming out, and I'm going to have to wallop this deer. We got to end this. It's been, by this point, it's like pushing 2 o'clock in the morning. So I get ready. Jason came around with his flashlight too, so him and Fuzzy are standing like right behind me, more or less. And he throws that last stick, hits the deer in the butt. The deer's coming. Well, dummy me, I stepped forward to meet it. I went right in the water. Well, I blocked the flashlight beams, and I was instantly just blinded. I couldn't see nothing. But I was already in mid-swing. I was already gauging when I was walking in to hit the deer. Well, my hands hit the muzzle of the deer, and an axe flew out of my hand into the water. And I started backing up right away because this deer was coming. Well, it had knocked its head down slightly just from my arm smashing its in the muzzle. And well, he regained his composure, and he just kept coming. He stuck his head down. He was coming at her. He was done. He was going to gore somebody. And I kept backing up, and it was it was right there. So I grabbed the horns, and I jumped on top of the deer and rode it down into the water and ice and mud and crap. And I started screaming right away. I said, Fuzzy, stab him. And I got second time I said it, Fuzzy was already screaming in my ear, I am. And I didn't realize that when I jumped on that deer and went down, Fuzzy jumped right on top of me and the deer. And he had his knife out, and he was just hammering his deer in the side. Pretty brutal way to end the deer's life, but it is what it is. I mean, what are you going to do? Let it just stay wounded and not finish it off? That's not an option. So we ended up finally getting it dead. And then we're like, man, we got this, drag this thing a long ways yet, get it out. And it's cold and we're completely soaked at this point. Middle of the night in, November, snow on the ground. It was cold. I mean, it was actually, didn't really think much of it at the time because you're young and bulletproof, but that's a dangerous situation, So we started dragging it in. We're young, like I said, and just full of piss and vinegar, and we were yanked on this deer. It just basically ran through the woods with it until we got it. With the radio, we were coordinating my dad and my other buddy in the truck, and we got it to that spot where they could get in to find us, and threw it in the truck and got back to the camp. And we got into camp, and I mean, from the knees down, we had to sit next to the fire and basically chisel ice and stuff off our pants and whatnot to get boots off and those clothes. And I just sat there, me and Fuzzy sat there in front of that wood stove for probably an hour or two, just trying to get warm, and just couldn't get warm, sitting there in a pair of shorts. I mean, it was a good thing that it wasn't a longer situation. We'd end up with hypothermia and frickin' died. But anyway, that was the story of Fuzzy's buck that year. So it started at 10:30 in the morning, and I think it ended at 3 o'clock in the morning by the time we finally got back to the camp. Heck of a story. That just goes to show you, though, that the boys were not willing to give up as long as there's any way, blood or a track in the snow. You're just, oops, damn phone. You won't give up. And that's, I mean, you owe it to the deer. You take responsibility and make the shot, or take a shot, and you do everything you possibly can to recover that animal. I mean, you owe it to him. So that's the end of that story, and I guess we'll see you on the next one. Thanks for watching.